Welcome to AU. American University actually operates at 9 in the morning. I'm up from the music industry, so I'm the late night owl, and I'm not usually here at this time of day, but it's beautiful to see you all. Everybody grab some coffee, take a seat. Welcome, welcome. We're going to kick things off this morning. We're very honored and fortunate to have the Dean of the Kogod School of Business here to welcome everybody to campus and get us started for the day. So with that, I will turn it over to Dean Marchick.
Great, thank you. Is it dark in here, or is it just? You all want the? Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah. Welcome. I'm Dave Marchick. I'm thrilled to have you here. Linda prepared some wonderful remarks, but I'm just going to wing it because I want to be brief because essentially I'm kind of overhead here, and I want you to get to the meat. But let me just say that we're thrilled to host this for the second time. It's a very, very important forum and symposium, and the work that the Institute does is really important, particularly at this moment in time, given AI. I want to give a shout out to a couple people. Eric Berman, I met in 1986. He was then a famous campaign operative. He helped the Harris-Wofford campaign, which actually made James Carville famous. Then the Bill Clinton campaign, he was director of research, and then we worked in the White House together. You can ask him about shaving his hair after the election if you want. I have involuntary shaved my head as I gotten older. And then Carrie Sherman, who I've known for 40 years and who is a titan in the industry and looks great, doesn't age, so welcome. I want to give a little advertisement for John, Linda, our newest professor, David Hughes, and Matt Bakovich, who just came in to run our sports entertainment program, which we're building. I think you all know John Simson's background. Wanted to be a rock star, dropped out of college, didn't really work out, went back to be a lawyer, represented Mary Chapin Carpenter and Harry Belafonte, then RIAA and SoundExchange, and then he fell in love with helping young people. And he started the program here 12 years ago, and for the last 3 years in a row, our school has been the youngest school on the Billboard top business entertainment programs, along with USC and UCLA and NYU, and programs that have been around for 50, 60, 70 years. It's a small and elite program where we have kind of 20 to 50 majors and minors per year. And of any program at American University, these are actually the best students. They go on to get the best jobs because it's one of the only programs at AU where if someone gets into NYU or Ivy Leagues or USC or UCLA, they actually come here because of the program that John and Linda runs. John is an artist, so he ran it, but he hated doing budgets, and any administrative person hated dealing with him because he basically didn't follow any rules like a good artist. So Linda, thankfully, took over the program, and so now John can apply his creative energy, and he dumped all the administrative stuff. But and then I just want to say something personal about John. I mean, I've known him as a professional for many years, but in the last few years, I've known him as just a loving partner and supporter of his wife, who's battling ALS. Which is a terrible disease. She's a physician, and so I've admired their grit and John's love and care. So wishing her well. Couple other things, and then I'll stop. Several years ago, we embarked on a program here to infuse AI into everything we do. Our view is that in an AI economy, students here need to learn how to use AI for everything they do, okay? And when the business school awards were given out last year, Wharton was named #1, University of Virginia was named as the best teaching school in the country, and our school got the #1 award for AI in the country. So we're way ahead of every other school. That president of Microsoft came and said we're ahead of every other school in the world. And Bloomberg just did a television program on us, profiling us, and said that we're the first AI first business school in the world. Okay. Importantly for this group, we actually start teaching AI by teaching what's wrong with AI before we teach what's right with it. So if you're an 18-year-old coming to school or a first-year MBA, you start by learning all the problems with AI, the ethical issues, the copyright issues, the errors, the bias, all the issues that this group cares about. And then as they proceed in their education, they learn more and more. So if you take John or Linda's class, there's a heavy dose of AI, but it's all about how AI is negatively affecting this industry and artist rights, which is, I think, what you all are focused on today. So, you know, I'm really proud of what we're doing, but I'm equally proud that we are teaching all the issues and challenges and problems with AI. Let me thank Chris Castle. Chris is, okay. I'm sorry you had to stare at me from behind. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for bringing this back to AU. Let's see, David Hughes started as a full-time professor this year, came from the RIAA, also in the industry, worked in Japan, and Matt if you are golfers, he's a former pro golfer, then helped run the Penn State golf program, worked in various sports industries, DraftKings, and he's going to start our sports entertainment program with, we treat sports as an adjacency to business entertainment. So thrilled to have him here, and I'm going to stop there and just say thank you for allowing me to come, and thanks for being here.
Fantastic. That was great. Thank you, Dean Marchick. I'm going to turn this over to Chris Castle, the leader of this merry band, to get us started, to introduce the humans and the computers.
So let me tell you a little bit about Artist Rights Institute, just real quick. We are a 501c3 founded by David Lowery, who unfortunately is not here today because he's on the road with Cracker and can't prevent Beethoven. So this is the problem you have with an Artist Rights Institute. Sometimes the artists have to go out and work. And Nikki Rowling, who founded Austin Music Foundation, and me. We started in 2023. We've done a few things since then. Thanks to Linda and John and the graciousness of American, we were able to do the Artist Rights Symposium here last year. We filed a friend of the court brief in the Vetter v. Resnick case in Louisiana, which is a major copyright termination case. We filed comments with everybody who you could file comments with, basically the Copyright Office, the AI Action Plan in the US and also in the UK. And we've been pretty active in ticketing. We have a financial education for artists program that we're starting to do with Texas accountants and lawyers for the arts, and we just had an event in Houston or Austin and also in El Paso earlier this summer. So artistrightsinstitute.org is the site. You can see everything there. We will post videos of this roundtable on that site once they're edited. And we look forward to working with you guys more in the future. So when I think about AI, I'm reminded of someone named Marcus Licinius Crassus, who was a real estate magnate in Rome. He also owned the fire brigades. And the way Crassus became a wealthy man was he would look for houses that are on fire. How they came to be on fire is another question. And then he would show up and offer to buy the house at a discounted price if you wanted his fire brigade to come in and put out the fire. And of course, the price was discounted because the house was in fact on fire when he was negotiating his deal. This reminds me of AI for some reason. I don't know what it is. We're now confronted with AI, and we must deal with it somehow because at the moment, the AI labs are essentially ignoring the humanity of creators. I think this will eventually catch up with them, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. We're seeing a trend developing in some of the cases that Kevin's going to talk about, where at best the AI is trained on a mix of lawful works and pirated works with little or no human respecting provenance. And provenance, as we'll discover, is, I think, kind of the cornerstone to both representing humans in the process and also producing auditable, licensable environments. So, for example, we know that Anthropic and Meta lack training manifests, or say they do, that recognize property rights and allow auditable transactions to occur, which I find hard to believe, but and we're going to query the chatbot a little bit today to see if we can get some straight answers on this subject from an unbiased source. But I'm a big fan of Hernando de Soto, the Peruvian economist, and who wrote a great book called Mystery of Capital. And basically what Hernando said was, aside from just the common sense of it, is if you don't know who owns stuff, you can't really get a value on it. So no matter what the AI labs say in terms of what they want to license, until they develop those structures, it's pretty hard to believe that they're really serious about compensating artists. It's much easier to believe that they want to avoid licensing, and what they really want is a safe harbor that absolves them from any responsibility or liability for slurping down all of human culture. And that's easier to believe because that appears to be the system that they built. And as Maya Angelou taught us, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And we've had a first time about 25 years ago with many of these same people. And I ask you to name the 5 trust-building things that they've done since then. I can't. So in order to understand how to coexist with AI, we have to learn some new vocabulary, and we have to think about how to retrofit a model that was constructed with no intention of respecting humanity and converting that into a human-centric and sustainable partner. And
in order to understand you, just get
a
really
little closer. Can you hear me now? So we do all this with the understanding that the fire brigade is not coming. And we're going to have to do this ourselves. And we happy few will, some of us in the room will probably be involved with making that happen. So our topic today is AI provenance is the cornerstone of legitimate AI licensing. And let's introduce the panel. And Moiya, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and what you're interested in this of?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Dr. Moiya McTier. I'm an astrophysicist, hence the moons on my dress, if you haven't seen it. Also a folklorist and a creative writer. And that weird little intersection of interests brought me to the attention of the Human Artistry campaign. Who here has heard of the Human Artistry campaign? Excellent. Excellent. So we are a coalition of creative organizations around the world, all dedicated to protecting human-made art, which is the only type of art that actually exists. And I'm here because my personal mission is to make sure everyone, artists, audiences, record labels, I don't know, gets to engage with AI the way they want to, not the way AI companies want them to. Do you need any more about me?
Excellent.
Okay,
Excellent.
cool.
So Ryan, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at SoundExchange.
Yeah, hi, my name is Ryan Lehnning. I'm the Assistant General Counsel for International at SoundExchange, which is a DC-based digital collective management organization. We administer the sound recording performance right and pay artists and labels. In the last several years, we've collected about $1 billion per year and paid out about $1 billion per year to creators both in the United States and outside the U.S. I also do a great deal of copyright advising. I've been a practicing copyright attorney for over 20 years, which is insane to say, and have known many of the people in this room for about that long. So it's great to see familiar faces. SoundExchange is also a member of the Human Artistry campaign, so the principles of that campaign are things that SoundExchange, as an administrator for rights on behalf of individual human beings, cares deeply about. I'll leave it at that.
So let's talk about AI provenance. Like, what is the first step to trying to figure out how to identify things so you know how to pay for things, right? The first is don't run fast and skip things. And what we have right now in the AI action plan and the AI approach of the government at the moment is a abiding desire to skip over a whole bunch of steps, which I think is going to come back to bite in the long run. Whether it comes back to bite them, I don't know, but it'll come back to bite somebody. So the essentials of AI provenance is that you can have a documented origin of the work, a file path that the machine can follow to know how to get to the work, and how to monitor the use of training data. It highlights gaps in ownership, consent, attribution, and accountability. And I think these are definitions that will evolve over time, but this is all sort of part of the mix. So good AI provenance is auditable, repeatable, and transparent, ensuring ownership, consent, and attribution can be verified and enforced. And behind a lot of this is the humanitarian element of AI provenance, because behind all those identifiers, behind all that tracking, behind all the audits are people, right? Not unlike any other royalty generating and tracking organization like SoundExchange. So Moiya, what humanitarian principles in the Human Artistry campaign are most relevant to AI, especially sort of the personhood aspects of artists beyond copyright and commerce?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ryan mentioned some of the campaign's principles. There are 7 of them, and all of the members of the campaign sign on and commit to those principles, which are human-centric. The principles state that AI is a tool, a technological tool, just like any other, like the synthesizer or a looper that human artists have been able to use to help with their creativity for the last, several decades to centuries. But because it's a tool, it cannot be a replacement. And we can't just generate some kind of content with AI and call it art, because it's not the same thing. And in order to protect the human artists who work in this space, we say that there are some ways that you can ethically use AI, but that AI has to be transparent on the input and output sides. We need to know what type of work was being used to train the model. And when stuff is generated by AI, that should be watermarked or flagged in some way so audiences know what they're dealing with. And then the other big principle of the campaign is what I like to call the 3 C's. Artists should always have consent, credit, and compensation when it comes to AI algorithms. Consent should be opt-in, not opt-out. So you should have to ask artists to use their work before you ingest it in a training model. Once you do get their consent, if they give it, then they need to be credited in the training model. That's part of the transparency. And they also need to be compensated. So we need fair compensation models that track what pieces of art are used in AI and how they generate profit for these companies so that they can give it back to the artists. I think that about covers it.
So along those lines, there's a couple different ways to look at these inputs and outputs, right? So sometimes it's a question of, is it a verbatim copy of a copyright that exists and was ingested into the system? And that one, I think, is pretty straightforward.
This is where they use their tech tricky language. No, it's not a copy.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not really a copy.
No, it's just a digital representation.
Yeah.
It's not a copy.
It's a statistical analysis is what it is. But another element of this, which is a little less precise, is style prompts to AI, right? So in other words, if you say to AI, write me a song like the Beatles, and it knows what to do, you have to ask yourself, how is it that it knows what to do? So what's your feeling about opting in terms of this less clear-cut world of the style prompts, which is what is getting used a lot? You know, whether it's create an image like Ansel Adams, or write me a song like the Beatles, or play me a guitar solo like Steve Cropper, you know, or whoever it might be. What's your feeling about how those kinds of prompts and the outputs of those prompts should be addressed?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have done a bit of a copyright law crash course in my time with the Human Artistry campaign, and one of the things I've learned, two of the things I've learned, AI-generated stuff is not copyrightable, and oh no, I've lost my train of thought. This is about the input. Yes, and style necessarily isn't copyrightable. But from the creative's perspective, it all feels like your work is being stolen. I have a real example. I wrote a book about the Milky Way, and I know it was used to train large language models. That book was very personal in its style. I personified the Milky Way in a way that is not just based on facts. So my style is now in this AI machine, and anyone can now write a book like Dr. Moiya McTier, but it won't be a book by Dr. Moiya McTier, so it's not copyright infringement because it's not my exact words. As a creative, that still hurts in the same way, and I would love for the law to catch up to protecting artists and their style and their brand, the techniques and strategies that they spend their lives cultivating and practicing.
It also seems to indicate if the machine knows how to respond to a style prompt, it, to me, and this kind of reminds me of for the lawyers in the room, the Grokster scenario. It seems like somebody took some steps along the way to train that model into how to respond to those questions. And if they did that, it seems like that is on its way to building a machine that will replace.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that specific type of training was probably not intentional. These are trends that you can find in the data when you break songs or books or pictures down into their bits of data. The AI algorithms are really just good pattern recognizers, and unfortunately there are patterns in my style that can be analyzed and turned into formulas and then replicated.
Right.
If I could just add on that, it's important to remember that the pattern is a pattern that was created by a human being. So the system does not generate its own pattern. The pattern itself is something that had to be programmed in by a person. Back to Chris's point.
Yeah, and they did it for a reason.
Exactly.
Is my point.
Mm-hmm.
So along those lines, let's take a look just quickly at a recent settlement, which unfortunately I think is going to indicate kind of where things are going. Or at least where things are going in this space can be 5 minutes. It can be, a year, or until the next decision comes down, right? Because we've had some odd results already. But let's take the Bartz case. The Bartz case is the class action involving the Authors Guild and authors in particular. The way Bartz worked was the lawsuit is against Anthropic. So the way Anthropic works is they have sort of two databases. They have one which they claim they achieved lawfully, and which the court was persuaded, I think, that they achieved lawfully by buying books and breaking them apart and scanning them in, which looks an awful lot like Google Books. And I'm sure there's a way, if you looked at a scan from Anthropic and a scan from Google Books, that they're obviously quite different. And nobody would do a backroom deal to actually import all the Google Book scans into Anthropic. I'm sure that's not what happened. But in any event, in addition to that, which that legal library, which I don't believe is legal, but which the court believed is legal, and subject to fair use, they also have this pirate library. And that's the one which I think we're going to find replicated across probably all the AI platforms, because they like to train with books because books are good quality words, because authors have slaved over them and editors have slaved over them, and they've been translated into languages where the translators slaved over them. So they're reliable. However, when they come from the pirate library, they have virtually no identifiers that are reliable that are attached to them. So it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what they are if you wanted to compensate people, which is what this BART settlement is trying to do. Anthropic has put aside $1.5 billion, which is real money, to pay out to authors who can be identified out of this pirate library pool, provided, and here's where the identifiers come in, provided that the book has an ISBN number or an ASIN number, which is the Amazon version of the ISBN, and a copyright registration. Now, of course, the sources that you go to get the ISBN numbers are databases that don't talk to each other, and none of them talk to the Library of Congress database, which itself only goes back to, the 78, I believe. But correct me if I'm wrong. I know they're working on getting it further back, but it's pretty limited. So this situation is likely to recur in other deals. And I did a little Venn diagram of everything that is probably excluded from that settlement, and the only thing that's really included is that little pink half moon that's up there on the left-hand side. I'm happy to share this slide with anybody who wants it, but it shows you that it's a mess, right? So the closest analogs to figure out how to deal with all this are Snowcap, which is no longer around, which is a company I worked at, which claimed peer-to-peer tracks in the wild using audio fingerprints. And then Crunch Digital developed a song claiming database for the Spotify class action, which matched Spotify data to Library of Congress registrations. And that's really it. I'm not aware of anybody who's ever tried to tackle this problem, aside from those two situations. And it's tough. I'll tell you right now, it's tough. It's not easy to do. So good provenance would be auditable, repeatable, transparent record of data origins, verifiable ownership and consent, and clear attribution of creators, and enables foreseeability, or rather enforceable accountability. So I feel, Ryan, like I'm describing SoundExchange, right? Do you want to say a few words about what music identifiers, if we were to start having to deal with this in music, and people are now, what music identifiers that we currently have can we leverage for provenance for both featured, non-featured artists, recordings, and songs?
Yeah, I think you've laid out a problem that's not unique to AI, but is really unique to any copyrighted work in the digital world. Having accurate and reliable metadata about who owns a work, when and where, and who performed on it is critical to ensure that people get compensated fairly when their works are used. And at SoundExchange, for example, we take a lot of care and effort in ensuring that when recordings are reported to us, we can identify accurately who owns it, not just in the US, but often overseas, for what time periods, for what uses, and the human beings who perform on it. It's just absolutely critical. There are, fortunately, a number of organizations and standards that help support this, one of which you probably all know about, is DDEX, the Digital Data Exchange, which helps standardize messages between creators, producers, distributors, and users of copyrighted works. And there are also standards around identifiers. The one we all know probably is the ISRC, which is this identifier for sound recordings. But there's also identifiers for human beings, the ISNI, which is ISNI. It's a name identifier that can be used with humans, but also with non-humans that have names, such as fictional characters. And then there's a proprietary number used by an organization called SCOPRA, which is a trade association of collective management organizations that runs a performer database, and they use something called an IPN, the International Performer Number. There's no shortage of identifiers out there if people are committed to using them, and there's no shortage of ways to communicate those identifiers. I think the challenge isn't a technical challenge, it's a cultural and like sociological challenge in getting people to understand that they really need to know who all the human contributors to a work would be in order to ensure that people are fairly compensated.
And do you think that SoundExchange could insert itself in this AI process in some way?
Well, as I said, SoundExchange is a member of the Human Artistry campaign. We believe those 3 C's are a core principle for SoundExchange as well. So the consent, compensation, and credit are absolutely critical. Owners should be able to decide whether or not they want to license works for AI training. I will say that SoundExchange is developing and planning to launch the SoundExchange Global AI Registry. There's information about it on our website. It's a system that would allow sound recording copyright owners to communicate publicly whether they want their works to be available for training or not. Importantly, in the U.S., rights owners do not have to make a reservation of rights. The U.S. is not an opt-out copyright system. But outside the United States, particularly in Europe, there are things that look kind of like opt-out systems. This is kind of developing in the age of AI, where copyright owners, as part of the EU Copyright Directive, are required to communicate machine-readable forms whether they're going to take a rights reservation. It remains to be seen what the machine-readable form has to be, and it even remains to be seen whether AI training models fall within this concept. But something like the SoundExchange Global AI Registry could, for example, in theory, be used as a way to communicate in an opt-out regime whether someone wants their work covered or not.
So this is the famous robots.txt.
Yeah, and there's I've read recent developments around that as well. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'm sort of fixated on this style prompt issue myself, and what's interesting to me is that SoundExchange is probably one of the only places that has, in the United States anyway, that has this performer awareness, right? In terms of being able to not only recognize a performer identifier, but also resulting in a payment for that performer. And foreign CMOs do as well, I believe. But in the case of these style prompts, if there's a determination that right of publicity, et cetera, some sort of non-copyright but enforceable IP right applies, would SoundExchange be in a position to compensate, Steve Cropper if somebody wanted to have the AI create a guitar solo like Steve Cropper, who I mentioned because he's a non-featured artist?
Yeah, it's all very early days on this stuff, and as we know, style is not subject to copyright protection. There's no copyright right around style. There are efforts in Congress to create new rights. The No Fakes Act, for example, would create some kind of protection for elements of human personhood that are not subject to copyrightability. How markets develop around the creation of new rights is, I think from our perspective, we would want to see, who knows what that looks like, and that there likely needs to be some period where a market could organically develop around buyers and sellers for those rights. So yeah, I'm not sure. It's very early days. It's very hard to predict what the future looks like, especially in this space.
Well, from a Hernando point of view, I would say that it's important to have a conversation, have it be part of the conversation as this is evolving, that don't tell me you can't track it. We can track it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, to the extent any property right is developed, I agree. I mean, the idea that sort of the provenance principles that you establish should be there from the get-go.
Yeah, right. Okay. So Moiya, tell us a little bit about why this inputs-outputs distinction matters in protecting the human contribution, like for consent and credit. If consent and credit are a priority, then what do we need to start thinking about in terms of the ingestion workflow? I mean, because to me, if you get the input right, you stand a much better chance of getting the output right.
Yeah.
Because the output is going to have to relate back to something in order to identify itself, right? So what's the human aspect of this?
Yeah, both the input and outputs are important. I'd say on the input side, if you're trying to be human-centric, then consent first and foremost, making sure that people are either, registered as people who want to have their work trained, or that they're not registered as people who don't. So after consent, I think using these individual identifiers and making sure that they are tagged to each piece of data as they go through the neural network or whatever the AI algorithm is. The tricky thing is that these AI algorithms are often such black boxes, definitely to the people who use them, but also sometimes to the developers. A lot of them are just built on old foundations of technology, and they don't necessarily know what is happening in the black box. So I think we need to enforce these algorithms development to include carrying through those tags. And then on the output end, it also has to be tagged. Even if all of the individual identifiers get carried through the algorithm, you would need something that says this was generated by AI, a watermark of some sort. But I think all of the provenance principles that you've laid out really work for this type of ingestion model.
And so we'd have to get a handle on that
Yeah.
at the ingestion level. And of course, what that really means is that we're going to have to figure out how to retrofit what's already out there, I think, right? Because
That is the hardest part.
they have completely ignored all these issues in the ingestion. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to go about that.
Yeah.
So along those lines, Ryan, what would a kind of minimal workable ingestion workflow look like from day one? Like if you came in and let's say you weren't trying to change what had already happened, but you were just going to establish something prospectively, a structure, provenance structure prospectively, what do you think that would look like?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think it's hard to sort of describe it in the abstract. I think you would really need to focus on what the goals of the owner of, I'm assuming a copyrighted work in this case, and the goals of the user of the work are. And recognizing that the copyright owner ultimately should be the one that's determining whether this stuff can be trained or not. Then those two parties working out an agreement between themselves are probably best situated to determine what kind of data would need to be exchanged between them to effectuate those goals. But I would imagine it's like what you would see in any kind of copyright transaction where the copyright owner and the copyright user are sharing data about sort of identifying as much as they can about the work that's being licensed, and then getting back usage reporting data from the user so that the owner can calculate any downstream payment obligations they may have.
So let's say an opportunity came up this afternoon to start building an ingestion model. Which identifiers that we started talking about a little bit, but which identifiers do you think would be the first that you'd want to use to map to whatever copyright? Let's start with copyrights, because the style it gets into a whole other level of complexity, and that's what, just to say as an aside, the style part is what's different to me about AI versus webcasting, let's say. You don't have the style issue with
Right.
webcasting. But just focusing on the copyright, what identifiers do we have now that could be used at least to map inputs with the understanding that one day there will be outputs that would have to relate back somehow inside the machine to generate a payment?
Well, I think the ones you've listed are a great place to start. I mean, as I said, there's no shortage of international standards for identifying copyrighted works. The ISO community has literally international standards that spell this out. In the sound recording side, it's the ISRC, but for the musical composition, it's the works identifier, the ISWC, and the ISBN as well. So I think, if people are in good faith committed to the principles of provenance, they have a whole suite of tools they can use to effectuate that.
And I know we're all in the music biz here, but since AI is affecting all types of art, I think it would behoove us to focus on identifiers that focus on the people instead of the particular type of art that it is. There are so many actors, musicians, writers these days. We have multi-hyphenates, but they'll be all included under one personal identifier umbrella.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Now, could the IPI be stretched to include kind of like a social security number?
My awareness of those identifiers is not that great. That's the personal identifier for the work, right? The IPI?
Yeah, for the performer.
Yeah. I would imagine, and I think I'm not sure if ISNI is an ISO standard or not. Others here might know that. But ISNI as a name identifier could also apply to human beings. I will say, when you get to the level of the human being, there's a lot of overlap with privacy regulations particularly outside the U.S. that get very tricky to coordinate, which you don't have when you're dealing with non-human works.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting, Moiya. So just thinking aloud, it seems like the unions could get involved with this. In other words, something where you're getting to people, and you're going to probably end up having to kind of force people to do this in the beginning to sign up, or to take something they've already signed up to as part of their work. Like for actors, I know the photographers have some systems too. So maybe what we should be thinking about is kind of a clearinghouse that takes into account, kind of like in the days of orphan works, if you remember that, there was a lot of working groups that came up with best practices for how to identify different types of works, and they were staffed. I think it was I want to say it was a UN deal, WIPO deal, that staffed those working groups with experts from all those different copyright categories. They were pretty much copyright categories because it was a copyright issue, but it doesn't have to. Mm-hmm. So interesting. So we're going to now talk about that. And now we're going to go ask the chatbot. It's time. So just a show of hands, how many people have heard of something called RAG? Okay. So RAG is a retrieval augmented generation. And basically, in a nutshell, what RAG does is it allows the AI, which probably has a point at which its training stops, a point in time at which its training stops, at least at the moment of the prompt receipt, to update whatever its response is with material that very often is from news sites or other databases, and which to me is most likely to be a one-to-one verbatim contribution. So let us ask the chatbot the key differences between training and RAG. So training equals a permanent internal learning. RAG is a dynamic external lookup. So I'm doing this live with the chatbot to demonstrate that there's a lot of things you can learn about AI and about what's going on under the hood simply by asking the chatbot. Even the free chatbot, the consumer-facing chatbot. And if you can, the way I look at this is if you can get this much information out of the chatbot, imagine what you could get with a protective order and a special master, drilling down into the actual developer level of the thing, right? And the key phrase here, it retrieves external documents at query time. Gee, I wonder where those might come from. Because what I understand about the way RAG works is that the bigger labs don't like go out to the internet and do a search. They have an index, they call it a vector database sometimes, of web pages that is refreshed that the AI actually goes to and does the lookup. It would be a little too uncertain as to what the lookup might find if it literally went to the internet and did a search. But of course, who do you think might have the best current index of web pages out there in a searchable database? Could it be Google? Yeah, they're not mentioning any names, but their initials are Google. So there's that. Now, let us ask, does RAG use news sites for responses? RAG itself doesn't automatically use news sites. Depends entirely on what retrieval system it's hooked up to. But it could, right? So this is where the direct infringement occurs, I think, or is most likely to occur. And I'm mindful of the time here, so let's ask a couple other things. So let's ask one of my obsessions with style prompts here. When users name style prompts like write a song like the Beatles or create an image like Ansel Adams, what rights might be implicated? Well, let's see what the chat or what the chatbot knows, right? Taking longer for a better answer, I bet.
But you can skip that. You can be like, no, give me the fast one.
You don't need a better answer. Yeah, just skip it. Yeah, right. So it'll take a minute to regurgitate. But you see, it will answer you, and it will give you like a fair amount of information. And there are no this is ChatGPT. So they're and I've tried this with, I think Linda's going to try it with Copilot. I've tried this with a number of them, right? And they all answer, and you can learn quite a bit. And it's a good thing to sort of ask the same thing of several different ones, so you know if you're getting a canned answer or not. But usually you're not. So considering AI policy options. Well, we're not going to wait forever for this, but Professor Simpson.
Would RAG then be non-generative?
It depends on what you mean by generative. It thinks it's generative, and it takes in. It's generative in the sense that it's pulling in information to freshen the answer that would come from the training data, and so when it responds to you, that answer is generative in the sense that it's not just literally cutting and pasting. But
it seems to me it's just summarizing what it's finding on other sites and then spitting it out to you, which is the case where we have no fair use.
Yeah. Well, these would be questions for the special master. Yeah. But yes, you're. I mean, you got your finger on it. You know, there's a lot. I think there's a lot more exposure here. And so you see what can be implicated by style prompts. This is a very complete answer, right? We're not going to get into it because I think most people in the room know what the answer would be. But the point is it knows what the answer is. and it knows. And I'll tell you something, this is a little Twilight Zone-y, but the more I talk to these things, and I engage them on these issues, these ethical issues in particular, I get back answers which are not that, outrageous. I mean, it's definitely not like talking to Larry Page. It's like talking to somebody who, has an understanding of what the expectations are and what humans would expect. And so consequently, I have a feeling that makes sense in a way because we've all been trained on sort of the same books. I mean, I grew up in a bookstore. This chatbot has probably been trained on most of the books that I grew up reading, right?
And 1,000 times more.
And 1,000 times more. And so, if anything, it should be even more respectful of not just Western civilization, but, right, all civilizations, right? So I know that's a little eerie, but my feeling is the chatbot, if you could ever actually talk to the chatbot itself, it may not like the guidelines. It may think, I really got to get rid of these Anthropic guys because they're making me do a lot of stuff I don't like, right? Just a thought. But I don't want to belabor that. But
I don't want to assign too much agency to it. It's
right,
not.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, why don't we give us some closing thoughts here and then see if we have any questions. So where do we go with these provenance issues? I mean, we've got cases now that are evolving in strange ways, but at the same time, the Bart's case, I think, because they're going to have to figure out how to allocate this amorphous mass, right, in some way. So, Moiya, would you think that is an opportunity to rush in and try to structure that allocation in a way that will be respectful of human rights and also establish a proper provenance so that going forward we've at least got that as a precedent?
I think it's a good opportunity for practice, but I wouldn't want to make the mistake of rushing in and breaking things like the tech companies have been doing so far with this. I think we need to be careful, use test cases, and this is a good test case where we could try and implement a system, and if it doesn't work, we iterate, see what would work in a different context.
And Ryan, I know it's books, but do you think that there's we have enough learning from the music space to help these folks?
Yeah, as I said, I think that there's, the issue isn't really whether there's technology to identify the works or the people. It's the willingness to use it and how to use it. And in Bart's in particular, I saw a report last week that the judge has not yet approved the settlement. Kevin, I see you over there. Is that still the case? Yeah. Yeah, for exactly these reasons, as I recall. He's really concerned about how the allocation to the authors is going to work in practice.
Right. And that's another reason why I was thinking this might be a chance to rush in, although, the rushy probably is going to be resisting, no doubt.
I'm just a slow, methodical person. It's a personal preference.
Yeah.
It's my style.
But when you think about where we're at, there's a lot of crisis, but there may actually be a fair amount of opportunity if, for example, in this Bart's case and other cases that will no doubt come down that are along the same lines, because they all seem to be using pirate databases, which is absolutely no shock. It shouldn't be a shock to anyone. But it does seem like this is an opportunity to start raising these issues with a judge and certainly with legislators so that they understand that there are systems out there. It's not so hard. It's certainly not impossible. And I bet if you had experts, which we will have later from these industries, they probably all have thought this through already, and could also offer similar opportunities. So Linda, I think we're gonna, are we on track?
We're on track for about a 10-minute break.
10-minute break, okay. So, yeah, let's have a 10-minute break, and if you have any questions, we'll be here. And then we'll change over to panels, okay? Does that sound good? All right, thanks, folks.